Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I am delighted to be joined on this episode by Brett Puffenbarger, who's the co-founder and CEO of Good Highdeas over in the States. Brett, how are you keeping today?
I'm doing all right, my man. Busy day, but can't complain.
That's what I like to hear. Busy is always a good thing. So thanks very much for taking your time out to come on the show. You might give everybody a quick overview of how you got from Bong to Boardroom and your journey into the cannabis industry quickly.
Yeah, man. So I didn't really discover cannabis until I was in my mid 20s. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and I came to it as a patient first, and then after a little while, I realized that it could also be a career opportunity because I'm a big believer in you never work a day in your life if you do something you love, and I love the plant, I love the people, I love the industry. And it just became a thing. So I'm a marketing and public relations guy by trade. Before the cannabis industry, military, owned a couple karate schools, and then I was a director of business development at Harley Davidson. And believe it or not, there's a lot more similarities to working at Harley and working in cannabis than most people would believe, because it's a lifestyle first, right? It's not just an industry. It's not just a product category. It's a lifestyle. And that's how I try to treat it and look at it.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, and I think you've got it right in the nail on the head. I think cannabis is going to fit right in within some of the normal industries. It's, excuse me, either going to be food and beverage, it's going to be lifestyle, as you said. So a lot of the current industry is going to be able to adapt cannabis into their current strategy and profiles. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is consulting and advising in an ever-changing landscape. It's pretty myriad of rules and onslaughts all over the world. It's not just in the States or Europe. I think everybody's dealing with a changing list of rules. What has it been like over in the States? Is there any more clarity towards federal legalization? And how do you guys go about advising your clients state by state and product by product?
There's 38 different cannabis industries in the United States, plus there's probably double that in different countries who have some level of framework. And we're actually working with clients in a couple of different countries right now, in addition to the United States. And something that I think is kind of important to note is that consulting and advising are actually different. And a lot of people kind of put them together. And we try to differentiate them, right? So consulting is going in and getting inside of the company and working with the individuals within the company to develop plans and strategies. Whereas advising is kind of being an outside observer, right? It's being there as a resource for advice or to offer direction, but not actually being involved in the day-to-day operations. And what I've found is that advisory services are actually more powerful. And here's why. Because as a consultant or an advisor, at least in my belief is that my goal should be to make myself obsolete sooner rather than later. I want to teach you the skills to do what you need to do. So something we do that's kind of unique at Good Highdeas is we like to empower the internal team members to do the things. We'll be there as a safety net. We'll be there as a helping hand. We'll be there as the person who can help you kind of navigate the things. But we want you to be the one to do it. We look at it at more of I guess you would call it a mentoring relationship, though I'm very reticent to call it that. And my big focus these days is, if you look at my resume, I look like any other corporate cannabis guy, right? Like if you look at me as a person, I don't. I look very much more like a legacy cannabis guy. And my goal is to blend those two worlds together, right? If we're talking bridging the gap to Bong to Boardroom, I mean it, and I mean it in that order. I'd like to help the small legacy operators, the medium-sized companies, the people who are intrinsic to the culture compete with the industry, because those aren't the same thing as much as people would like to believe they are.
Okay, very interesting. And how have you guys found have you got clients across the whole states, and are the different rule sets and advice and, let's say, consulting the points of rule that you'd use different depending on the east and west coast, or is there a kind of synergistic strategy that you use across the whole of the North America?
So I think a lot of it could be broad strokes, right? A big chunk of it is the same. Like if you're getting into cultivation or extraction or things like that, those are going to work the same way no matter where you are at geographically, right? The plant's going to grow the same no matter where you're at, minus some variation in climate and temperature and little things. But a plant is a plant, a machine is a machine, a product is a product. When it comes to the marketing, public relations, business development, those things, each state has its own approach because each state has its own license structure, right? So what I would suggest a company do in California is very different than what I would suggest a company do in Florida, because particularly because we do business to business stuff, and a lot of our clients are primarily business to business clients. So
Mind if I interrupt you there? Are those strategies going to change when federal legalization happens?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm in that little group of people who are kind of like Chicken Little right now, who are going, you guys do realize that federal legalization changes the game. Who are the big players now will not be the big players then, because their business model isn't set up that way, right? If you look at the large multi-state operators, if you look at the way they operate in primarily East Coast states with limited license structure, regulatory capture, forced vertical integration. And if you look at the West Coast states, I think they're better prepared for federal legalization, because what's going to happen is traditional unit economics, producer and consumer states, the places where cannabis grows well naturally, are going to do better at producing products than the places that don't. And we see this in almost every other industry, right? Like, you don't mine the steel the same place you smelt it into a product. You don't harvest the stuff and then put it into a factory right next door. No, it gets moved as a raw product, and then it gets processed, and then it gets distributed back out. And I think it's going to completely upend the cannabis industry at large. And truth be told, the thing I'm most excited about is the public relations, advertising, marketing side of the house. We're very restricted. We've had to come up with some very unique and interesting ways to approach those things. And I'm excited to be able to do what everybody else does, right? Like run Google ads, run TV advertisements, run anything like that. I think will be huge, because right now it's a game of attention, and there's very few ways that other industries have to gain attention that we do. And we've kind of had to make up our own. And I'll be honest with you, I'm really tired of retrofitting things, right? I'm tired of reinventing the wheel every time we need to do something. And I think that's exciting. I think it's going to be fun to watch us kind of grow, because we started as this like post-prohibition industry, right? And then we've kind of grown into what we think is an adult, functioning, vibrant industry worth billions of dollars, but we're still kind of a toddler, right? We're still kind of a little kid, and we need to start growing through these phases. And I'm really excited for the next couple of phases of, like, you know, older childhood, the teenage years of the cannabis industry, and then eventually to get to what we all hope it's going to be, where people can go to college and get a degree in cannabis, where it's no different than saying, mommy and daddy, I want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or I want to work in space, or I want to work in this thing. That's way off, but we're taking the steps to get there.
The next topic I wanted to kind of jump on to, after this, and I know you guys wanted something around this. So you just mentioned there, we're a young kid, we're only grown up in the industry, so we're a little teenager who's thieving at the moment. So corruption in cannabis, we're seeing a lot of headlines of CEOs, especially in some of the Canadian companies, taking obnoxious annual salaries and look like they're almost pilfering the company. What can you tell us about corruption in cannabis that you guys are working on your Project Mongoose operation?
Project Mongoose, in short, is the ability to give someone else a platform, or to use our platform to kind of talk about it. So something I experienced in the early days of my cannabis career is that it can kind of suck to work in cannabis. It can kind of be difficult. It's not all bong rips and high fives. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of pivots. It's a lot of crazy stuff. And once you've been in cannabis for a little bit, you kind of realize that you're on an island, that most of your friends also work in cannabis. They're your peers. They work at this company or that company, or they work in a different state than you do. And something I realized in just my day-to-day conversation is that we were all experiencing a lot of the same problems. It didn't matter what state or country we were in. It didn't matter what industry segment we were in. And something we really wanted to do is provide that platform for people to have this traditional water cooler talk in public. Because if we really want to affect change, if we really want to make the industry better, we can't hide this stuff. We can't act like it doesn't exist. We can't turn a blind eye. We have to address it head on. We have to talk about it openly and honestly. We have to drive for accountability. We have to do all of these things. And truth be told, if people really want to understand what's going on in cannabis, you have to understand a simple equation that we use in the public relations world, and that is that image plus identity equals reputation. And that's a little more complicated than it sounds, but image is what other people say about you, and identity is what you say about you, and your reputation is the combination of the two. What we have in cannabis is a whole bunch of companies with amazing identities. If you look at nothing but their press releases, their website, their marketing stuff, they look like the greatest company in the history of companies. And you can point at a whole bunch of them, so it's not just one. And if you look at their image, they have awful Glassdoor reviews. They have terrible customer reviews. They have a simple Google search of a lot of the major MSOs with a basic term like scandal, lawsuit, corruption, union. If you start pairing those up, you see a very different story than their identity tells. And that's a problem. That's a problem that needs to be addressed, because it's not just the Canadian CEOs pilfering the companies. It's not just the American MSO executives and their spouses getting popped for corruption charges or getting sued out the wazoo. It's all of that at one time. And that's just not what we need as an industry to grow up. If anything, it's hampering our ability to grow up in a lot of ways, because they're here doing exactly what you said. They're pilfering the companies, or they're living off of it. And truth be told, I think it's actually one of the most condemning pieces toward our future, right? So if you look at the large cannabis companies, whether they're US or Canada, or even some of the European ones, all of them kind of have this idea, or they at least position themselves as thinking, we're going to get bought out by the big boys. The Procter and Gambles, the Johnson and Johnsons, the Coca-Colas of the world are going to buy us. And they aren't. I don't think they are anyways. Why would they? You guys are scandal-ridden, losing money. You're not doing any of the things they're looking for. And I think those companies, like the big guys, are looking at that, and they're playing a much longer game plan than the company, like the major cannabis companies realize. And it's because we're corrupt and we're broken, and they see it. They see it in the pay packages and all of the stuff.
Okay, amazing. Well, as I said, we've only got a short show that we do for each one of these. I think we could talk all day and continue on, but we'll definitely have to catch up at a further date to do part 2 and see how Project Mongoose is going on. But Brett, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been very much appreciated. My
pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Anybody wants to check out Good Highdeas, I'd highly recommend it. Their website is there below. You're going to be able to see it. This episode will be up very shortly, and we'll chat to you on the next episode. Thanks, Brett.
Take it easy.